Okay, good morning everyone. Thank you all for joining us today for the second day of the SEEDIG 2018 meeting. This is the first session of the day, session on cybersecurity with the overarching theme of securing all data. Today during this session we'll be covering topics on regional cooperation and national cybersecurity frameworks. For this session, moderators are Vladimir Radunovic from Diplo Foundation and me, Alexander Racev from Macedonia National CSIRT. We also have panelists for this session. So we have Mikhail Boni, member of European Parliament, then Predrag Tasevski from IGF Macedonia, Gergana Petrova from RIPE NCC, and Adel Abusara from the OSCE. As I said, today's this session topic is on regional cooperation, and this session, the format of the session will be interactive exchange of experience on regional cooperation between you, the audience, the participants of the session, and also our panelists. After this first part for sharing examples on regional cooperation, then we will be looking at what's good and what needs to be improved. The third part would include also some guidelines on how to the role the national frameworks and the elements of national frameworks have in actually also promotion of regional cooperation, and at the end of the day, and in the end of the session, we'll of course have conclusion. We also have online moderator Sidorela Mema and our reporters who will be gathering the final keynotes, Andriana Gavrilovic and Oliana Sula. So I think that we can now start with the first part of the session. Vladimir.
Thank you. So Alexander already introduced the format. Which usually means in our type of sessions that we, at the end, will probably be dancing and singing. But we'll start with, with a bit of wake up. We thought of how to organize the session where we want to focus on cooperation. And we do have panelists, but it doesn't really make sense to start the cooperation with panelists. We'll start with you. What we want to hear is some good examples of cooperation in cybersecurity in Southeastern Europe. I'm sure that many of you are aware of some projects, conferences, and one of those is actually this one, which is a good example of cooperation, or maybe there are also bad ones. So before we turn to panelists, I want to hear from you. If you know any examples, if you have been involved in any of the events, conferences, projects, which are related to cybersecurity, not necessarily focusing only on cybersecurity, such as this one, SEEDIG covers other topics as well, where you can share the experience of how that works, what was the focus of the discussion, who was involved, and so on, just to get the temperature, to sound the temperature of what exists in the region, and then through that see what might be actually missing. So I'm encouraging you to raise the hands immediately, and I do know we do have a couple of faces here that we prepared to start with. Anyone that wants to share the experience, please let us know. We'll start with Irina, because she was involved in one of the projects in Serbia, and then I'll chase you around to get more.
Yeah, I'm Irina from Diplo Foundation, so I'm going to be a bit cheeky and take the floor spontaneously, absolutely, of course. I'm sure Adel will talk about it in more detail, but in Serbia we have a case study of a public-private partnership initiative that's a pioneer in the region, as we like to advertise it. It gathers representatives of all relevant cybersecurity institutions, ministries and agencies, and also representatives of the private sector, including private companies, the banking sector, universities and NGOs. We've been working as a group for 4 years now? Four? And throughout this period, we met at least twice a year at dedicated events and also on different conferences and seminars. And we worked on recommendations for amendments to the law on cybersecurity, to the first national cybersecurity strategy, what the action plan to implement this strategy should contain, and we also last year had a first ever national policy-oriented cyber drill to test communication procedures.
Okay, interesting example of sort of multi-stakeholder project on the national level. I don't think we have something like that on the regional now. This is probably a challenge for the Macedonian friends because you were sort of a host of the digital summit recently in Skopje. Does anyone of you want to bring, I know that there was a topic on cybersecurity there, but we don't have to go into what the details of the sessions were, but what was the sort of a target group, or what was the profile of people that gathered at the digital summit? There was a high-level ones. How did it work? Does any one of you want to comment briefly on that?
Digital summit, as you know, was held in Skopje, but unfortunately, cybersecurity and the cooperation among the 6 Western Balkan countries was not on the agenda. So it was about the cooperation to use the opportunity of the digital assets in order to improve the business, in order to improve the cooperation among the region. Also, the high expected topic was about the Balkan roaming, but somehow it was also mentioned that the cooperation among Western Balkan countries is very important to improve the roaming and improve the to decrease the prices for roaming services among Western Balkan countries and also among EU and Western Balkan countries. So, as I said, cybersecurity was not on the agenda of this summit.
Thanks, which might be an interesting point afterwards for Mr. Boni to react. How do we put cybersecurity on this sort of cooperation between EU and Western Balkans? Anyone else wants to jump in at this point with some example of cooperation or some of your experiences? We'll get back to you later. Okay, should we move on to the panel? I don't know, Mr. Boni, do you want to start with a bit of reflections from the side of the EU and cybersecurity in the Western Balkans, or the Southeastern Europe more broadly?
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for this information on the lack of cooperation among Balkan countries in the area of cybersecurity, because what is the most important now in the European Union is the work on, firstly, implementation of Network Information Security Directive and work on Cybersecurity Act. In those proposals in this kind of legislation, we are discussing about the new mandate for ENISA, European agency responsible for computer incidents and cooperation between European countries. And what is important to strengthen the cooperation between European countries with exchange of information, with common trainings, with common work on recognition, the possible schemes of attacks, and some recommendations related to certification schemes. So my first recommendation is try to cooperate among Balkan countries in the area of cybersecurity, add the cybersecurity with practical solutions to the agenda and to the Balkan strategy on digital issues. And after that, try to start cooperation with ENISA, because I think that it would be, and it should be possible to have a place for some kind of observers, because I think it would be very, very important to have this knowledge which ENISA has, and on the other hand, to contribute to the common European work on recognition of cybersecurity threats. The second point, which is important, and also I think we need to cooperate all over the European Union, is related to certification schemes and the recognition of risks. Risk analysis and risk management is one of the key issues. And I think that we are discussing in the European Union now on how to be prepared to the common European certifications, because as you probably know, we have now 28 models of certifications. So it's completely against the common cybersecurity play and acting. And I think that it's important to go forward step by step, using, of course, voluntary decisions done by member states and the industries, and join the work on common European certification schemes. It's the role for ENISA, it's the role for the Council with all stakeholders, because the decision and the proposal is to work with business, to work with all industries, to create the industries-based approach on those issues, because they should be various and different. It depends on devices, it depends on infrastructures, it depends on some threats at different kind of levels. But I think that it would be great to join Balkan countries to this common work and invite. So my recommendation also to Commissioner Gabriel will be at that area two things. Firstly, to discuss about the possibility of cooperation representatives of Balkan countries with ENISA, and secondly, to join Balkan countries to the common work on certification schemes in the future, because it will be also very important for your business, for business in Balkan countries, yes? It would be easier to expand the business to the many European countries if the certifications will be the same, will be similar. And the last point, I think that we all understand that what is the most important is to raise the awareness of the problem and start with our individual responsibilities, yes, and start with shared responsibility at the level of state, at the level of European Union plus neighbors countries, the level of member states, the level of companies, all companies, also small companies, and the level of individuals with our understanding how we need to use some kind of cyber hygiene.
Thank you. I think this looks like a good wish list. Now, if we get back to reality, on one hand, you said what you would suggest to Commissioner Gabriel. I want to check, was anyone of you involved with the Bulgarian Presidency in a couple of months when it comes to digital issues and cybersecurity? Was anyone following, or was it the events or the Bulgarian Presidency? No? Because I had the chance to be in, what was it, in March, there was a Bulgarian Presidency event on cybersecurity actually in Sofia. And we had people from, or representatives from the institutions from Southeastern Europe, from non-members also. And Bulgarian Presidency did put formally a lot of focus on Southeastern Europe digital and cybersecurity. Now, the good question is what will come out of that on the European level, especially with the new presidency. One of the questions that was raised there by the regulatory authority, for instance, from Serbia, was exactly on the point that you mentioned. We should be more involved in ENISA, but will EU actually find a mechanism to allow us to be involved in ENISA? So that's one of the questions that remains open for on a European level. And then the other one is to what extent the governments of the region are actually following this. And I'm probably back to the comment from a Macedonian colleague, why cybersecurity might not have been on the agenda of the Digital Summit in Skopje, and generally, even within this whole concept of the support for Western Balkans and digital issues and so on, which is focused on infrastructure, but not on cybersecurity. Now, maybe, Adel, since you are, once you finish with your bottle of water, I was catching the moment when you start doing that. Since you come from the regional organization, you work a lot with those sub-regional organizations and on a political level. Before you go into maybe the criticism, Any of the positive examples that you could say on this political level of cooperation in Southeastern Europe, if there is any, or then why this topic is actually missing from the political agenda?
Okay, so good morning from my side as well, and yeah, thank you for the invitation, and thank to all of you who came in this early hour. We'll try to make it worthwhile to all of you. Now, there are definitely different examples, some positive and some negative ones, and you can pinpoint. And usually in these conferences, you try to emphasize the positive examples in order to make it, we all feel happy, we go away from the conference thinking that we've done something really important and really interesting. Some positive examples exist in terms of the way international and regional organizations actually trying to put cybersecurity as a topic on the agenda. And they do it definitely, but they do it at a national level. So they all try to dedicate some money to different cybersecurity related topics. What is bad, and I'll really try to emphasize a little bit of how we don't work, is the lack of coordination thereof. So, and this lack of coordination actually exists on several levels. And I'll try to give, if you allow me, but stop me when I'm too long and everything. So, first lack of coordination is related to the organization itself. And I can, being a member working for an international organization for quite a while, OSCE, I can give you an insight example on how it works. So OSCE deals mostly with cybersecurity. When it is about cybersecurity, it deals with high politics. OSCE makes an effort to create a nice and comfortable venue for countries to work together on different cybersecurity issues. For this reason, they have created the so-called confidence building measures for states in cybersecurity, and I won't go too much into it. But when you put this, which is very important, because at this moment we don't have international norms, UNGG didn't work, and so there is a reason for this, and it works quite good, although they're voluntary. But when you put it at the national level, and OSCE, apart from its secretariat, OSCE also has missions in the Balkans, in the Caucasus countries, different missions do not coordinate among themselves. So Irina already mentioned the thing that we did in Serbia, and I think I'm very enthusiastic, by the way, about this, and I'm very enthusiastic that this could also spill over to other countries, mostly in the region, in the Balkans, in Southeast Europe. But for instance, there is no good coordination among different missions about what's been done. My colleague from NCERT actually told us, and I knew that at some point this year there will be a drill simulation exercise in Macedonia, but we've done it 6 months ago, and we could have helped a lot, we could have shared some experiences, and this has not happened. Recently, OSCE Secretariat has made an effort to make cybersecurity focal points in all missions, to connect those people and to invite them every now and then, at least once a year, to invite them to share experiences. This is good, this is important. They even created matrix on, okay, we all fill in what's going to happen and everything, but there is no substantial coordination on this. Now, this is not good, really. The second layer is, again, at the national level, different international organizations, they all try to do most of them try to do something like UNDP, NATO, OSCE, European Union. They try to work, but they do not coordinate among themselves, which leads to a lot of overlapping, leads to bad waste of resources to some extent. And then we don't have what we really want on a national level. Then on the regional level. On the regional level, you have, for instance, you have Regional Cooperation Council. Now, for those of you who don't know, Regional Cooperation Council is a successor of Stability Pact for Southeast Europe, and it was to be an umbrella organization at the regional level, and an organization who would deal with basically all the matters which are important for the region. This has not happened for a number of reasons. We can debate why and whatever, but there is no time for that now. At this point, and a couple of years ago, when Ms. Vlada and I spoke, a couple of years ago, Diplo and some other organizations tried to put cybersecurity at the agenda of RCC. At that point, it was not interesting for those folks. Now, maybe just a couple of months ago, immediately, suddenly, it became very interesting for them. But what they don't do, they don't deal with cybersecurity the way on a comprehensive way they should. They try to connect it with online radicalization or foreign fighters, fight against foreign fighters or whatever. I mean, no, the inclusion of foreign fighters in the Western Balkan countries. Now, all this is also important. Cybersecurity and fake news, cybersecurity and cybercrime, but this is not cybersecurity, and this is not how this topic should be dealt with. This is utterly wrong way to deal with it. And then finally, just for this, for now, just for the gloomy picture, to make it complete, I would also like to speak about European Union, which, as Mr. Boni has already said, has not really found a way yet to foster cybersecurity in the Western Balkans. As we spoke yesterday, cybersecurity is a topic, and it's a topic at the EU level, and it's been dealt with in an interesting manner in the last couple of years, but within the borders. Outside the borders of the EU, this is not the case. For instance, we have had only one cybersecurity policy-related project which dealt with EU money and dealt with the Western Balkans. And this was a pilot project, and it entailed some work in Kosovo, Macedonia, and Moldova. Now, it's interesting first why Moldova. There is a reason for this, because the fund that was used for this needed to entail at least one country from Central and Eastern Europe. Okay, this is fine. Then some French consultancies got money to work on this. Okay, they don't know anything about Western Balkans, but still, this might be okay, yeah? And some things have been done. But then, after 2 years of this project, and with some success, for instance, creating NCERT, but not creating strategies in Macedonia, not creating CERT in Kosovo, but helping creating cybersecurity strategy in Kosovo, etc., and so on and so forth. This project has not been continued. So it's a pilot project, and a lot of efforts, and for instance, Kosovo's cybersecurity strategy puts in its national action plan a lot of hope that this project will fund some events and some things that need to be, some actions that need to be done, but nothing has happened further on. So this is not the way things definitely should be done. And on the other hand, you have new strategy for the Western Balkans, European strategy for the Western Balkans, which specifically emphasizes that cybersecurity and cybercrime are topics that need to be dealt with. So we need to see also, it's not only us, it's not only some international organizations, but it's also European Union who should find a way, and we know that European Union takes time for European Union to put something from strategy to practice, but also really needs to find a way to deal with this issue in a comprehensive manner. So much for now. It's not all gloomy, it's not all bad. I mean, there is a lot of things to look for, but at this point, international organizations do not have a way to deal with cybersecurity in a comprehensive manner. Thank you.
Thanks. This gives me both sides of the picture. So a lot of problems, but also some hope, because you said there is already in place some of the potential on the political level. There is some sort. The topic is becoming sexy in a way, which is a chance to use it if it's becoming sexy. But then we have to find a way to do that. We have a comment from the remote participant, I think. We have a comment, right? Do you want to read it or? Yeah, sure. Let me see. Maura Tampieri. It is a pleasure to take part in your meeting. I completely agree with the first discussant. There is a lack of cooperation at the European level. I think that it's important to harmonize the legislation of European countries about computer crimes and all the topics connected with cybersecurity. For example, in Italy we have the Article 640 criminal code about computer fraud. I fiercely trust in this kind of meeting, and I hope a collaboration between Italy and Balkan countries may be during Italian IGF 2018. I understand this as an invitation to Italian IGF as well. Thank you for the invitation. Before I get back to Mr. Boni, I think you wanted to react, right? Is there anyone of the friends from Kosovo here? Okay, because I thought if we could, if anyone actually knows about the project that Adel mentioned, it appeared that it really came from some of the EU funds, but not many stakeholders do know that the project was there. So that's also one of the challenges that we see, is the inclusiveness of the existing projects, the visibility, the transparency, and so on. Mr. Boni, you wanted to react quickly. Oh, you have? Okay.
Yeah, I have. So thank you very much for your input to this discussion. I think that there are some problems. Firstly, when we are talking about digital development, we are talking on digital agenda for Balkans, and we need to cooperate with Commissioner Gabriel, who is responsible for digital development. But on the other hand, I think it's important to analyze what kind of programs, and if I know there are some programs, addressed to Balkan countries by the Commissioner Hahn, who is responsible for neighborhood and enlargement. And I think that we need to use money from this kind of policies to establish cooperation. I think it's one of the key issues, because my question is, if in all Balkan countries CERTs exist, CERTs means computer emergency response teams. If those teams exist, so it will be easier to suggest that cooperation with ENISA could start, because ENISA is building the cooperation among countries, also using those CERTs. So I think this is the first step to establish those computer emergency response teams. After that, to suggest that they should be joined to cooperation with ENISA. Secondly, to check the possibilities in the neighborhood policy addressed to cybersecurity issues and support Han in preparation some projects. Thirdly, I'm involved in Eastern Partnership. And some years ago, we have created the Euronest, which means representatives of all parliaments from 6 countries. 3 of them are on the way to the European Union, but 3 of them, with Belarus, are not going to the European Union, as Azerbaijan and Armenia. But we have this Euronest with representatives of national parliaments from those countries and representatives of the European Parliament. It is a very good platform to exchange views. We have discussed 3 times about cybersecurity issues, so I don't know if this kind of parliamentary institution and parliamentary platform between Western Balkans and European Parliament exists. But if not, it could be great to suggest it, and probably from the new term after elections next year, it could exist and support many issues for stronger cooperation among Balkan Western countries and the European Union, also using members of the European Parliament. And the last point is related to the question from Italy about the lack of cooperation in the European Union. Yes, because, you know, this is a very big problem. In the treaty, we have security under the competences of member states. And very often member states are presenting the view that, okay, we want to cooperate, but we need to remember that security, and in view of some member states also cybersecurity, should be in the domain of member states. It's not so wise, yes, because the internet is cross-border and we need stronger cooperation, etc. So Network Information Security Directive entered into force on May this year. And also, if we will have this Cybersecurity Act, it will be the background for stronger cooperation among all member states. But on the other hand, at the same time, we need to add Balkan countries. As I'm working with Ukraine and Moldova and Eastern Partnership countries, to join them to those cybersecurity issues.
Thank you.
Just to add something about the ENISA cooperation, me myself, as a person coming from a national CSIRT from Macedonia, we've made several attempts in the past actually to reach out to ENISA, and in the previous years they just answered that they do not have mandate to work with countries that are not member states of European Union. But we already see this a little bit changing, because even though we are not member of EU, as well as other countries from the Western Balkans who are also not member states, ENISA has already listed the national certs if they are established in these countries. We are looking for cooperation, and I want to approach ENISA once more, especially on CSIRT's activity to be part of the European CSIRT's network, which I think ENISA is responsible for. Maybe not as members, full members, maybe just, as you said, as an observer, because the ENISA, I think, should be one of the focuses for all CERTs regarding regional and also European cooperation.
It's a very good idea and a good step.
And I think this gives a good merger of the two communities, basically a technical community and a political level cooperation, which is an interesting combination from the CERT level and from the political level. Before we turn more to the now technical, academic, business views of that, I want to check with you if anyone has any comments at the moment, and if anyone has actually an idea how we could, what are the steps that we should do to use this potential of possible political cooperation on a regional level. Fotion, who is not with us today in live, but he's remotely, sent a comment that we need some sort of a synchronization and cooperation between the regional cooperation and the European cybersecurity agenda, which we basically touched upon there. Any comments there? Yes, please introduce yourself.
Thanks. I'm Tanja Pavleska from Jožef Stefan Institute from Slovenia. First, one remark that in the Western Balkan Summit there was a special session on trust and security, including cybersecurity, and their discussion took place about how national incident response team should coordinate and how to become part of ENISA. So I'm sorry if I'm just contradicting you, but I was part of the panel session. It was quite interesting. But maybe the issue on how to collaborate with broader EU and how to get to EU funds was not touched upon. And I think that's very important because, for example, we have great cooperation with the region in submitting project proposals for European projects. But then I will give example about a project on implementation of the eIDAS regulation for electronic identity. The project was highly ranked but not accepted. No project for inter-regional cooperation was accepted. Only European countries got funding. And then another call was put into place for European experts that could advise or consult non-European countries on implementation of this regulation. So I think this is redundant. These are some redundant steps into how to use European funding and plus coordination effort that is unnecessary. I think that a true collaboration comes into play when all of us collaborate into the same projects, and that's how unifying of policies and strategies is also put in place, and no need for additional consultation.
Thanks, and thanks for sharing the experience from the Digital Summit, because it's important to hear where we are there, and especially on this political level. I think this brings us a little bit back to what Ada also mentioned in the coordination of the approaches by the EU, by the regional organizations when it comes to funding and the projects and so on. And we have a couple of examples, and I know Petja will also mention later on the cooperation through NATO funding and with NATO and so on. So there are examples of cooperation on a political and technical and business level.
Hi, my name is Christina Lausson and I work for ETNO, the European Telecommunications Network Operators. With regards to Mr. Boni's comment on having an industry-led cybersecurity work and the discussions we have had now on the role of countries, I wonder a bit what the panel thinks about the role of industry versus the role of governments and how they can work together. For example, with regards to the Cybersecurity Act we are now discussing in the European Parliament, there has been a lot of talks about high-risk infrastructure, which is often, of course, owned by private companies, but which are of great interest to society. And I wonder what the panel thinks about the division of responsibility between industry and governments in ensuring cybersecurity.
Perfect, thanks. Anyone wants to take on this one? Sure, quickly. Petsa, by the way, you could also, because you're a part of industry as well.
So I will start and I will give you the floor if I can. It was established in the European Union 4 years ago, if I remember properly, the public-private partnership, cooperation between the European Commission, representatives of some governments and business. Why it is important? It is so important because when we are talking about cybersecurity, we need also to talk about the business development and research area. And in the Cybersecurity Act, there is a part focused on supporting the research addressed to cybersecurity issues. And there are some money for this support in the future European budget after 2020. The cooperation is needed because the state should be responsible for the framework, legal framework and implementation of European law at that area, and also for organizing some kind of sharing responsibility. But business should be responsible for risk analysis and management of risks, it's clear. And on the other hand, it is the first time in which we are starting the European debate on certification schemes. And it should be addressed to the business, because this is not the role of state to say that this kind of certification is needed. It should be industry approach. It should be differentiated. It should depend on many levels of risks after analysis, yes? So this is not the work for, this is my view, and I think in our European Parliament report we will strengthen this kind of understanding of those issues, yes? So I think that the cooperation between business and governments at that area is very needed, is clear, and also it should be clear what kind of responsibilities those two sides can take for the future, and start with cooperation, but with shared responsibilities on different issues.
Peter, you want to add anything?
Yeah, I work in both sides. So I work on the government level, but also I do have several projects on the industry side, mostly on finance, which is actually a critical information infrastructure, the one that you already mentioned. And that is true. Unfortunately, the lack of private-public partnership is missing totally. We do have several government organizations and different government entities and countries as well. They require their own certification, which already has been mentioned. And there are, on the international level, certifications, frameworks, and so on, and guidance that you have to take care of it, or you have to be compliant with. On one hand, but on the other hand, sometimes it comes to the question, is this enough? And definitely there is no enough always. There are always time to be improved. And I totally agree that we have to think of one general framework, or I will mention it as a certification or a standard, that will be guided for the European countries as well as for the countries that are going to be entering EU to be a member states. On one hand, this is a good approach, and then also on the other hand, we have tomorrow comes in the GDPR. It's a good framework, it's a good legal process of having better and secure customer and every data. However, there is only one process that is missing, and this is what I would like to mention it today. There is one point that is lacking, is cybersecurity culture. And this is what is missing. So we have to take care that to have all these standards, frameworks, certification and everything, and as well as having industry and government working together, you have to build a culture. And culture is actually one of the most hardest part to build upon, due to the fact that requires decades and as well as requires the time to build from youngest to the oldest stages and for different private-public partnership. Security culture or cybersecurity culture, the way of how it can be built and how it can be established is, I always mention, and most probably you have heard it many times during these 3 days, is awareness, 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 and awareness. I know some of you might be sick of it, awareness, but believe it or not, awareness is actually one of the main things that you have to push it. And there is one extremely good example, a country that does very great awareness, and this is where we are here, is Slovenia. So Slovenian National Cybersecurity Center, it does this awareness the best way. So they're doing it not only through videos, not only through posters, not only through campaigns, but they even build lectures, trainings for youngest to the oldest ones. So this is their program. So they have 2 or 3 trainers that go around the country and does this training. And it's extremely positive, extremely visible, of course, and everything. So this is where my second part touches upon, it's the education. So after awareness, you have to start doing education. And you can't only have cybersecurity or digital security or security topics only to IT guys, to nerds like me, or to lawyers or so on. You have to have it in every education level. So medical should know about, so medicine should know about security, physics, chemistry, biology, mathematicians, everyone should know. So you have to put this onto a curriculum. Only one course, 1 day course, 1 day training. That will be fair enough. And then last but not least, we already mentioned several times, is the lack of cooperation. And lack of cooperation on all levels. So lack of cooperation in the level of industry versus government, then NGOs and NPOs, and then you have different cooperations on the international level. And I totally agree with Alexander when he mentioned that whenever you try to reach out to ENISA, they will deny their cooperation. Actually, they don't deny it or they don't ignore it. They're willing to cooperate. However, it's not in their agenda. Because in the end, European Union and European Parliament gives them money. And if you are Macedonia as a country for entering and being part of this process, I don't know how many years, nevertheless, it's a long process, but still, they are not obliged to deal with you. They are willing to help, and I totally agree with that you already mentioned it. Yes, they are providing a list, they're providing a contact points. If you have a problem, or if you have a cyber threat, or if you have an attack from that country, please reach out to this organization, and they will try to solve the problem. And this is what we already mentioned with Alexander, because I was never aware that this actually has been happening. And indeed, this is happening. So, and even between regional certs, now we are discussing that we are trying to make a conference as well on that level. And all this, so awareness, education, and cooperation will bring something which I call cybersecurity culture. But coming back to another topic that Vlad already mentioned, and he already introduced it, I would like to mention cyber defense as well. This is a very huge and important topic. I won't mention that we have cyber warfare, I'm sorry. Whoever says that already happened, I'm sorry. That is totally not correct. Not yet, not until today. Let's see, maybe tomorrow. But nevertheless, we had, and I had, and many other organizations in the Balkan countries, we have established extremely good cooperations with NATO. And so I have been a co-director for 3 NATO advanced workshops. Not all of them were in cybersecurity, but again, or cyber defense, but they still touch upon the topic of digitalization. And this was one in 2016. We had encouraging cybersecurity awareness in the Balkans, where we had different military, but then also agencies, CERT agencies from different countries, and then also different OPSE and other organizations who are willing to help these countries to build cyber defense and so on. And then we had, next year, we had a benchmarking for telemedicine and improving health security in the Balkans. And when you mentioned telemedicine, everyone was like, what the hell is that? Like Skype doing medical exams and so on? And yes, that is totally true. So Skype doing, through Skype, you're doing a medical exam. And one of the leaders in the region, in Balkan region, is Greece and Croatia, due to the fact that they have so many islands, and it's extremely expensive to have one doctor in an island when you only have 50 citizens living there. So what they had, they set up one small internet point where they can go and they can call the doctor via Skype, and the doctor can tell them, oh, you got the flu, can you have this kind of medicine, and so on and so on, because it's much cheaper rather than sending the doctor by the helicopter or by the boat and so on. And the boats only go once or twice per day, so you can't do the examination. And then there is a very good point here where security, so telemedicine is really important, but the only thing what everyone forgets about it, it is the security that actually has to be implemented, due to the fact if I can control your bypass or if I can control your medical devices, I'm sorry, that's scary. And this year I will have, so this year NATO again sponsors another advanced workshop which will be held in Belgrade in October, and it will be a fundamental readiness in cyber defense in the Balkans. So what is the idea? It's the idea to take the approaches of Scandinavian countries, which are most advanced. That means Sweden, Finland, Norway, Estonia, and other Baltic countries, as well as Netherlands, due to the fact that they have just published last year, before the New Year's Eve, they published the second version of their cybersecurity strategy, and bringing many new topics into it. And this is, I think, it will be a very good reflection on the Balkan region where you can introduce this. So yeah, lots of international organizations, but still lacking, as we mentioned, cooperation. And again, I will mention it. And all in all, cybersecurity culture is the key point that has to be brought to this region. So it's not only awareness, it's not only cooperation, it's not only education, but rather, let's say it as a culture itself.
I think you mapped a couple of very important topics here, and I want to get back to the question that we had about the role of the private sector or the role of the stakeholders. One is awareness, one is education, one is defense. Now, if you focus on awareness and education, and we heard actually from you, on one hand, that it's CERT doing here, the National Response Team. On the other hand, you said that you are doing the project with NATO. So we have two completely different actors which are investing in awareness. And then I'm sure you have some other examples who is doing awareness in your countries. What would be the role, or do you have any of the examples from your countries who is doing the awareness on cybersecurity? Is there any partnership of different institutions that are investing in doing awareness on cybersecurity culture or cybersecurity in general? Any reflection? Any example? Quiet. Is anyone doing awareness?
Thank you. I work for the International Chamber of Commerce, which is a global organization based out of Paris, but we are present in about 100 countries around the world, many of them in this region. In 2014, 2015, we launched a project. Actually, it's a guide. We have a couple of copies in the room on the tables you can look at. It's a cybersecurity guide for business that was picked up and translated into French, Spanish, most recently in Croatian. We have that in the room as well, which is basically a guide for businesses, both small and big, and tries to promote a conversation between the nerds, as one of the speakers said on the panel, and the actual security experts within a company, and the management of a company, or even a small business who does not have that capacity within their firm of understanding what actually the cybersecurity risks are. What happens if a cybersecurity incident, and how to respond to those. And the guide actually has 5 simple actions and 6 principles that are explained for every type of business to understand these issues, and also has a self-assessment questionnaire for everybody who does business over the internet or just uses the internet for their business, to self-check on where they stand on these issues, and take the necessary steps that are advised there. And the guide is actually based on the principle that cybersecurity is an elusive concept and it does not exist. So what a perfect security is never going to happen. So what we're trying to do with that project is make people aware that incidents do happen and how to respond to them and how to be aware.
Quick sub-question, is it focused on one country only, or you are covering globally, and do you have any partners in this?
So it's not focused on one country. We are trying to do that globally for businesses. So we direct them to the actual users. And we are partnering with our networks in different countries. The Croatian part, for example, has local experts and includes a little attachment of firms and tech experts where there are further resources that people can consult. But it's freely available. It can be downloaded from our website, and as I said, it's translated in a number of languages. So we're trying to, and we have partnering also with the Netherlands-based Global Forum on Cyber Expertise to promote it. It was also included in one of their publications recently.
Thanks. I think this gives another snapshot of good examples that we have but we don't know about, and we probably lack cooperation, regional level understanding what's been done. So we have to map who's doing what. There's a big international project, Safe Internet Day, and even that we don't know if some institutions are involved and so on. So it's good to copy the experience. Anyone else wants to add anything on this? Or should we move to yes, we have 2 comments or 1. You also wanted?
First.
Okay, I've been involved in a project named eSense, and there I was responsible for developing a cybersecurity methodology for risk assessment and evaluation based on ENISA recommendations. And then it was quite successful because it was based on practical pilots into many of the member states, and it was related to the infrastructure that was designed as part of the same project. Then the project continued into what is now called TOOP, the once and only principle. It's a new project, and the development of the framework continues. So it was successful. It continues to be upgraded, and the good thing is that it is based on common principles for infrastructure and architecture in terms of technical architecture and business architecture, because there is one framework that is known as the ISA Enterprise Infrastructure Reference Framework, and now, in addition to implementing it in European project, we applied for a national grant, and we got funding for piloting on Slovenian ground. So I think that if a regional cooperation becomes possible with other non-European countries from the region, then it is a good way to address a problem by implementing a generic framework, because it will be at the same time unified with the European one, and best practices will be shared.
Hello, my name is Sietmir. I'm here for Electronic Communication Authority of Albania. And my first question here is to know from everybody is who are the players on cybersecurity. So we, as the regulators, we are seeing only ISPs in this case, and we impose some rules to them. We are inspecting them for, let's say, some issues on cybersecurity, but that's all. We can impose some fines there, but that's all. So if we go to subscribers, what we can tell them for cybersecurity? Maybe state institutions can be more present in this case. Let's say for training, let's say for education on cybersecurity. And also I'm inviting you to see this problem as a pure peoples. What they can do. In CEE countries, a lot of peoples are poor there. They don't have internet access in so many places. They don't have computers. They don't have smartphones. And if they will have it, and I'm sure they will have it soon, they must be prepared for such issues in cybersecurity. We have ALCIRT, it's an agency called for cybersecurity in Albania. They are new, they are working well, as we know. But let's hope that the state will be the first player, not only my state, but all state agencies will be the first player to start working well on cybersecurity issues. That's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think, okay, mapping the roles is something that we already started in a way. The one role that we sort of missed thus far, and I think it's quite important, it builds up onto what you mentioned, is the role of the technical community. And this basic infrastructure and how can we secure it from a technical perspective, not even having a need to go to governance to some extent. So Gergana, what is the role of the technical community? What exists maybe in this region when it comes to cooperation among technical community and with other stakeholders?
Yes, thank you. I come from RIPE-NCC, the regional internet registry for Europe, the Middle East and parts of Central Asia. I'm going to give you some examples. I'm going to try to make it as practical as possible, concrete as possible. So RIPE-NCC, we keep a database for internet number resources. That is basically IP addresses, autonomous system numbers. So when we talk about cybersecurity, let's say if you take a typical law enforcement agent, one of the most frequent things that somebody like that needs to do is you have a crime and you've managed to figure out what IP address this crime has originated from. And now you need to find out who is behind this. That impacts, from what law enforcement officers have told us, that impacts probably 90% of crime online. They need to, at some point of time, try to solve this problem. And it is not an easy issue at all. It is a very long, lengthy, laborious process trying to find out who is behind a certain connection. So what they usually try to do is identify the organization that sits closest to that person so that they can serve legal process to that organization. When I say legal process, they need to basically serve them a court order, subpoena them, and so on and so forth, so that they can dig in deeper. And basically, we and our database is at the very, very first step of that process. So law enforcement officers would come to the database and try to find out which is the organization that has this big chunk of block of IP addresses to which the IP address that they are interested in belongs to. So in the past few years, very often they would send us requests. We used to receive a huge number of requests from law enforcement for more information. Vast majority, I mean overwhelming majority of these requests were information for public data that anybody with a computer can find out. So this basically talked a little bit about the lack of communication and knowledge of basically what is publicly available. A very small minority of the requests that we would receive are about information that we simply do not have, or about information that we're not allowed to disclose. So there needs to be, for example, a court order from a Dutch court for us to disclose this. So what we decided to do, and we've been doing it quite intensively for the past 2 years, we organized some trainings specifically tailored for law enforcement. We have done this in person, but also online. So for the past 2 years, we've trained about 400 agents from all over our service region. And those trainings involve a lot of information about what the regional internet registry system is, about our policy development process, how to use the database, what information is contained about in the database, what information is public, what information is not, and why. We also discuss a lot of problems that they're facing so that we can also get understanding about their issues. And so this has really helped us, both sides, get a lot more understanding of each other's problems and processes. I'm happy to report that the number of requests that we receive from law enforcement agencies has decreased a lot just because of this increased understanding. They are now able to better know what information they can find and where without having to get in touch with us. So this is really great because it's efficient for both sides. For them, they don't need to follow the laborious process of contacting us and making a request, and also for us to have to answer that. And maybe I can finish with one last positive example that has come out of this increased cooperation. I mentioned that we have a policy development process for the RIPE community.